Start the record button, and I'm going to welcome everybody. Hi, everybody. Your host and moderator, Jonathan Fisher, here again, back on October 15th, 2025, for the Pacific Northwest Railroad Archive / Cascade Rail Foundation biweekly Zoom program. We have had a great series of programs so far. We're actually halfway through our fall season. I'm shopping around for a program for December 31st, which we may or may not have. But we've had some really great stuff. We had a bunch of different things coming up. I just want to touch on this. Coming up is probably one of the hardest guests I've ever worked on to get for a program. And I had her scheduled for a program, and then we had technical difficulties, and the whole thing went haywire. And it's taken me almost 3 years to get her back. Margaret Weatherby, head of collections for Washington State Historical Society, WSHS. So that is a big name in our history industry. So that's very exciting. Bob St. James, who's with us today. Bob is going to be doing a Blue Mountain program with us on November 12th. And on my screen, right next door, is George Hardy, switching in Seattle. And of course, George, I just was putting George on the program to come up with another program for us for next year. December 10th, Robert Scott and Jim Abney will be talking about railroading on the SP&S. So I just want to just quickly, a few dates are starting to fill up for the new year. Dale Sanders, for one, on January 7th. Elrond, are you here?
I am.
Hey,
I am.
El, could you let me just see if I can figure this out. And there you are. Hey, just tell us a little bit about you guys' program last night. It was so outstanding.
Oh gosh, yeah, I think it may go down as one of our all-time greatest programs. So this is part of our monthly programming series for the Center for Railroad Photography and Art. And last night, Dale Sanders presented Northern Light, creating a BC Rail portrait, which is a presentation he did for our Conversations conference, our annual conference that we do each spring. Dale did the program live for us on with his images on the big screen about his 20 years of working with BC Rail and capturing the railroad, its people, its operations, and how he had just this incredible arrangement or cooperation from the railroad where he would come up with outrageous ideas one after another and say, "Do you think I could do this? Do you think you could take me here? Do you think we could do night shots here?" And he just kept waiting for them to say no at some point, and they never said no. It came down to the point where he even was offered a helicopter to fly around with their crew for aerial photos.
And he got
But
to drive a locomotive. I mean,
he,
he got to do it.
on,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
just
yep,
talking to him this morning. So I figured
yep.
Elron would
So
be the perfect person to promote our January 7th Zoom meeting where Dale is going to do a three-peat on this thing, Al.
So he is doing the three-peat. Well, you guys are in for a real treat.
Oh my gosh,
You know,
yeah.
if you decide you haven't had enough of it, we are going to put it on our Rail Photo Art page on YouTube as well. The
Excellent.
presentation will be there
Excellent.
as well. I
Yeah.
can tell you, seeing it again last night, even on a little small screen, it was still, I was blown away all over again.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was just, and
Yeah,
speaking of
it's
CRPA
just
and the
yeah,
2026
one of the
calendar,
greatest.
right after Dale Sanders is going to be none other than your board president, Bon French, joining us. So,
Oh,
yeah,
there's another treat.
yeah, there's another treat, isn't there? So anyway, let's see here if I can figure out how to unpin. There we go. I unpinned Elron, and we're going to get started with our program in a minute. But
Woo!
first, a word from our sponsors. So our sponsor today for today's program is Milwaukee Road 5057, which is being restored by Cascade Rail Foundation. Here's a picture from our authorized tour of the property, thanks to our very, very good friends and partners on the project, Columbia Rail. And this is in their Richland, Washington shop. So a project that was absolutely dead as a doornail a year ago with a locomotive sitting in the bushes north of Spokane that hadn't moved in a decade is now sitting in a shop in Richland, Washington with a contract, a game plan, everything is in place. The only thing that we have left to do is to cover the final funding gap between this incredibly generous bid they gave us to do the renovations and the amount of money that we have. So we're looking at about $130,000 budget to finish, and we've got about $80,000 on hand. They think if we can come up with the funding, that we'll be able to have this locomotive ready for display by the end of the second quarter next year. So, I just got to reach out as the treasurer of Cascade Rail Foundation. There's the disclosure. Just need to reach out. You can donate on our website. And I can look people in the eye sincerely and say, this is going to turn out. We've got everything is figured out. All we need to do is come up with the last of the money, and we will have a locomotive, and it's going to go on display next year. So anyway, that was the word from our sponsor. And at this point, I know enough of me. I am going to find my friend Gordon and put him on screen. And I am going to remove my pin. Gordon, I've put you on screen. Welcome, Gordon Glattenberg, one of my dear friends, and always a absolute treat to have you on our program. And let's see, when you're ready to share your screen,
Let's
I'm
see.
going to turn it
Okay.
over to you. And I've canceled my video. And then soon as you're, like I say, as soon as you're ready to go, yeah, folks, if you could all mute your mic, please. Um,
Okay.
and also turn off your camera so that we can save as much bandwidth for the presentation as possible. Thanks. Gordon, take it away. First, okay, a little spoiler alert. We're going to see what Gordon did on his summer vacations this year. Take it away, Gordon.
Okay. Anyway, my program today is about railroads in Mexico and Guatemala. But before showing those, I just couldn't resist showing a few pictures from three trips this summer. This first trip that Elise and I took, we flew to Chicago to attend a convention. And we stayed in a hotel on Michigan Avenue, and we had access to a room on, I think, the 26th floor. And one thing we saw there was a fireworks show from Navy Pier. But what was a little different was over the weekend there, right around July 4th, there was a NASCAR road race that went right by the hotel. And I got a view from that same room of the road race going by, and here it is going over the old icy tracks. It was kind of a challenge to get the race cars and a train at the same time. From Chicago, we came back to California on Amtrak 5, the California Zephyr, which was a really great scenic ride. We enjoyed Colorado. We enjoyed the Nevada deserts. A rather surprising disappointment was Donner Pass, where there really wasn't a whole lot to see because there seemed to be trees in the way all the time. Our next trip was the following month in August. It was a driving trip, our annual uh, trip to Death Valley in the summer. And here we are at Furnace Creek. Our big trip of the year was last month in September. First, we flew to uh, uh, Newark Airport and visited in Manhattan, where we had a tour guide, Dennis Livesey. One of the places he took us was on the old High Line of New York Central, where we got a view where they're building the new tunnel under the Hudson River. Right in that same area was this building. I believe it's some sort of auditorium, and it was mounted on rails so it could move back and forth for whatever reason. One of the real highlights that we had there was a ride on the Circle Line Tours, which is a boat ride completely around Manhattan, and got great views of all the skyscrapers in southern Manhattan. But what I found particularly interesting was the northern part of the island, which was surprisingly forested. And we saw some rail activity. This is Metro North at Spuyten Duyvil. And right in the same area, we had to wait for this drawbridge to open after this Amtrak went by. And amazingly, that's Manhattan in the background with all the trees. Uh, One of the other places we visited on Manhattan was B&H Photo. I've done business with them for years and finally actually got there. This was a demonstration they put on lighting for portraits. And one evening we walked by this building. This is Moynihan Train Hall. Used to be the post office. And this is where Amtrak stops now in Manhattan. It's about a short block away from Penn Station, which is now just a commuter station. Well, from Newark, we flew up here, which is about a 4 hour flight. This is Nuuk, the capital of Greenland. And the reason we took this flight, I read about it in the spring that United was starting just for the summer nonstop flights between Newark and Greenland. I thought, this is something I got to try. There wasn't really any, it has a reputation of having no trains at all, but I did see a little bit of rail there. And what it was this defunct marine railway, which went a couple hundred feet da down into the ocean. We found the people there, most of whom were Inuit, really great to talk to and visit with. One day we were sitting outdoors and got to talking with this woman who it turned out was a professional singer, and she did a little concert for us. One thing I might mention is the architecture there was really unique with all the peaked roofs, obviously shed a lot of snow. While we were there, we saw a fair amount of military activity. This is a Danish warship that we saw cruising back and forth past the city. And this fjord that it was traveling through was regularly visited by icebergs, as you see on the left side of the picture. It was late summer, but they were still having icebergs from a glacier farther up. While we were there, the high temperature was in the lower 40s Fahrenheit. Finally, on the way back, we flew back to Newark and then back to California. And on that flight, we went directly over the Grand Canyon. One comment about this picture, I found the newest version of Photoshop has a great defogging feature, which is based on AI. So there was a little bit of fog of haze in the picture, and Photoshop got rid of it. Okay, now we'll get to the pictures that had been advertised. Uh, in the early 1960s, I took three trips south. The first was a driving trip from Los Angeles to Mexico City with the late Bruce Ward in his VW Beetle. And f from there, we took a side trip by air to Merida in Yucatan. The next year, I flew to Guatemala and also visited El Salvador. And the third year was back to Guatemala. Well, we'll start off here with a railroad that was located in the Pacific Northwest of Mexico. The San Diego and Arizona Eastern was a railroad that ran east from San Diego to El Centro, where it connected with the SP. It was originally built uh, by Adolf Spreckels, a I believe he was beer, a beer or wine magnate, and after the 1980s, Santa Fe had the only rail connection to San Diego coming from the north. Well, he wanted a direct connection to the east, so we built it, and it was completed about 1918. You notice it dips down into Mexico. And the reason is the direct route straight east through California, which Interstate 8 takes nowadays, has three 4,000-foot summits. And by dipping into Mexico like this, they were able to keep it down to one summit. So anyway, the summit was back in California, and it was about 3,700 feet. From there, it dropped down part of the way through a canyon called Carrizo Gorge to below sea level at El Centro. Well, here's a train starting the eastbound run from San Diego. It ran due south to the border, which is shown here. Now, you have the fence, Isidro, California station, and on this side is the Tijuana, Baja California station on what was called the Tijuana y Tecate. Well, here's a train crossing the border. Just east of Tijuana, it went through a fairly spectacular canyon. And east, here's another scene in the same canyon. The dam in the background is called Rodriguez Dam. It's Tijuana's water supply. Here's a view a bit farther to the east, just before the railroad started climbing the grade. There hadn't been steam there for quite a few years. Now, this is back re-entering California. The border actually went through this tunnel. This was a photo freight run by the Rail Museum that's located in the town of Campo. Now, I have one more shot in California taken in Carrizo Gorge. Oops. Now, this is the most spectacular place on the line. You can see how the track goes through the tunnel and then continues on along the gorge way past uh, this spot for about 3 or 4 more miles. There's quite a story on this spot. The the line originally went through the tunnel whose portal you can see right at the base of the picture. That was Tunnel 15. It then followed the hillside around to where you can see it go into the next tunnel. Well, Tunnel 15 burned about 1932. They tried replacing it or repairing it and weren't able to, so they built a new Tunnel 15 off to the left of the picture, and this trestle. So became a permanent shoe fly. The trestle is 180 feet high. Anyway, the line has been out of service for several decades. Now, a bit farther east is the Sonora, Baja California. Here's a map of Mexico. It runs from Mexicali up here in the upper left down to connect with what used to be the SP de Mexico and actually became the Pacifico Railroad and is since part of the national system. But several times I rode excursions from Mexicali down to a port on the Gulf of California. But this is in Mexicali, and this is uh, a motor car that was originally on the uh, uh, let's see, what was it? It was the uh, I forgot I forgot the name. It ran was uh, it ran up through past Death Valley. Death Valley. I'm having a mental lapse with this one. Okay, now here we are riding an excursion heading towards the Puerto Penasco on the Gulf. And here we are crossing the Colorado River on that excursion. Now, beyond this, we got out into the desert, which was very sandy and dusty. And we went into a siding to wait for this regular passenger train, which was really kicking up the dust. And here is the excursion train after the dust storm went by. Farther east, El Paso used to have a streetcar loop that went into Mexico at Juarez. Here's the car barn in El Paso. At the time I visited there in '62, it was all PCC cars. Now, here's a car running in El Paso. And now here's a little farther along. It's across the border into Juarez. And now here's a car returning. It's crossing the Rio Grande, and it's just about to the border. And here are a couple of cars at the border. Now, in 1962, I drove to El Paso and then headed south to the city of Chihuahua, which is about 200 miles south. And out of Chihuahua, off to the uh, right of the map, you found a mining district, Santa Eulalia. And there were two narrow gauge railroads that went up there from smelters in the city. One was electrified, and it went up to the mine, which was quite high up in the mountains. I'm afraid I don't know what mineral they were mining up there. I'm sure it was some sort of precious metal. Well, I'm intrigued here that on the second car from the left, there's a guy riding on the side of the car. Now, here's the other railroad. It was steam powered. It did not go as high up on the mountain as the electrified line, and it got its ore from a tramway that brought the ore down to a loading chute. But here comes the train, and it was quite a grade. And this train was right out of the 1880s. If you'll notice, it had Lincoln pin couplers, and with one exception, you can see a air tank and air pump on the engine. That worked air brakes on the engine. The cars had no air brakes. So here's the train going up the hill with five brakemen ready to work the brakes on the way back down. And here they are at the end of the line, turning it, of course. Here's the tramway for loading the ore, for bringing the ore down. And here's where they loaded the ore cars. And here they are heading back down with the brakeman working the handbrake. I was there in 1970, and this isn't a very good picture, but I did get both trains running at the same time. Now, the focus of my 1962 trip was the central Mexico, the area for 300 miles in any direction from Mexico City. That's where NAM still had a lot of steam power running. But on the way down, we stopped in Torreon, and here was an F unit. Now, this is just outside Mexico City. Here are some Alcos on a heavyweight passenger train. And this is in a city not too far from Mexico City, a switcher helping a 282 on a freight. These were some switchers at the Mexico City yard, and I thought of that paint scheme there as Santa Fe all the way. These were in fairly common use in the early 60s. These were Fiat motor cars. They were called, there they were called autovias. Here are a couple of, or some autovias running in northern Mexico past some sand dunes. Now, this is in the city of Aguas Calientes. This was perhaps the center of steam operations in Mexico. Here's the roundhouse there. It's mostly 282s and 280s in there. This was on display in Mexico City, and here's a 080T working in that area. There's 060 and another one. Now this is a steam-hauled passenger train leaving town. That has a 280. And here's another one switching. This uh, open-end observation is on a train that was running daily between Veracruz to Mexico City. I'll get back to that train a bit later. And here's a train on the Cuernavaca line, again a 280. Now this is a train coming up to the town of Zacatecas, which is a bit north of Mexico City. The town is at 8,000 feet, so it's got quite steep grades on both sides. And this is a northbound freight with a 280 and a 282. The 2213 is an ex nickel plate 282. I've always been intrigued by the pilot on the tender. This is at the top of the grade in Zacatecas, same place. Here's an engine house in the city of Virapuato. Now this is in Aguas Calientes. That's where NDM's main steam shops were located, and it was quite complete. They had a foundry, and they also did forging. And here's a 282 out on the line, getting some attention. And here's a scene with some sugar cane being hauled to the mills. This is a bit northwest of Mexico City, and this is a 464 on a freight train. A year or two ago, they were still being used on passengers. Uh, This is a earlier picture taken by Tom Gildersleeve, and this is a 464 with a passenger train complete with open-end observation. And here's a different type, a 480. And here's the valve gear on that. I'm trying to remember whether that was Southern or uh, some other type of valve gear, but it's definitely not Welshard's. Here's an engine house at a town called Escobedo. And a number of the 484s, like the ones you've seen here, had green painted boilers. This is the biggest steam power they had, 2662s. And it seemed to have steam coming from every possible place. And here's one working away. NDM also had about a 200-mile narrow gauge line, 3-foot gauge, which you see here, and that's Mount Popocatépetl in the background. It ran between Mexico City and the city of Puebla, which was about 40 miles east. But in order to get there on the railroad grades, it had to loop around all these volcanoes. Mexico City also had a streetcar system with PCCs. Now, the Ferrocarril Mexicano was an independent railroad up till the 60s when the national system took it over. This is a map of the system and ran from Mexico City to Veracruz. And the Mexico City is over 7,000 feet. Veracruz, of course, is at sea level. And the grade kind of in the middle between the two was 4%. And they had to electrify it. But this was their distinctive steam power, three-cylindered Pacifics. This is painted for NDM after a little bit after the NDM takeover. A lot of the FCM equipment had not been repainted. Uh, this 280 is an example of uh, uh, one of their locomotives in the original paint. Here's a 280 with a mixed train on a branch line. Uh, I asked for a cab ride on that and had no trouble getting it. I found myself really treated well by the railroaders down there, better generally than in the US. And here's riding that train. And here we are leaving town. Now, this is down in the city of Veracruz. They had quite a streetcar system, all these old cars from various US cities. This is the main train station in the background. And this is the one that really caught my eye, an XPE 100 class. Now, this is here's some pictures of that train that ran on the FCM from Veracruz up to Mexico City. I rode in this car, and it was an extra fare. As I recall, the extra fare was about 25 cents US. And this is the inside ceiling of that car. This is out on the line. I rode it a couple of times, and on this particular trip, there had been a quite a train wreck. This is one of the famous features of that line. It's called the Metlock Viaduct, built in the 1880s. Now here's the train below the grade, starting up the hill with a electric helper. And part way up, we met this freight with electrics. And here's the view out the back end of the electrics. And you see, we had two F units on the point. This is 4%, by the way. And here's the top of the grade. And they had the steam and electric here. And often the distance at one point, there had been a diesel also. I tried to get all three in one picture, but my train was about to leave. I never made it. In 1962, and then in 63, I visited Merida in Yucatan, which was the headquarters of this railroad, which was both narrow and standard gauge. Here's the main station there, and you can see it's dual gauge. This is inside the station, and these people were carrying uh, some sort of agricultural products with them when they rode the train. And apparently the door was too narrow, but for whatever reason, they were loading that stuff through the windows. And here is a standard gauge and a narrow gauge boxcar. This right here says the boxcar was built in Mexico. the scene in the yards. I don't think I've ever seen a switch stand like that one. Now this, they had a boneyard out and back with some derelict engines. This was the really remarkable one. This 440 was built in 1946, and here it was abandoned. So the narrow gauge engine did not last, but they did have a standard gauge 440, and it was working away. And this thing was built in the 1880s. That's the only time I've ever seen a 440 in regular service. Here's a picture taken by John Hungerford. They chartered a train with that engine and went out to the port and went out on the pier with their excursion. As I recall, it cost something like $64 US to charter the train. Now, this is in the Roundhouse, Merida, and this engine was originally Yosemite Valley Railroad number 29, the 260. Uh, Now, here's some pictures of passenger trains. This is just either backing in or leaving the station. Um, There's a 460 switching. And okay, now we go a little farther south past the next border to Guatemala. The uh, uh, international railways, which were known in the English as IRCA, ran in both Guatemala and El Salvador. I did photograph it a bit in El Salvador, but the real scenery was down in Guatemala. So here's a map of the system, and it covered Guatemala fairly extensively. I wrote it between Escuintla on the west and Zacapa on the east. Both are at fairly low level. Guatemala City, the capital, is about 5,000 feet, so you had mountain grades on both sides. Anyway, this is flying from Los Angeles into Guatemala. This was Pan Am, by the way. And here's some of the volcanoes around Guatemala City. And here's another scene flying into Guatemala. This is 1976. And the reason for all these white patches are in the among the trees, they just had a huge earthquake, and those are landslides. This is a another volcano in Guatemala. This picture was taken by John Kirshner. Now, this is the railroads station in Guatemala City, and to me, it just has a classic Victorian look. This is the board showing the locomotives that are being called. The 190s and 180s and 170s are all steam. The six is diesels. You notice that they have a lot of helpers listed in English. Now, here's the roundhouse there. These are all 282s. And here's one on the turntable in El Salvador. And I love the way that guy was getting his bicycle carried along. Here's a short freight leaving Guatemala City, and here's a passenger train doing the same. And here's what out to the west. And here's a passenger train with a helper kicking up the dust. Now, here's some scenes climbing the grade to Guatemala City. Getting access to the cab or on the tender was really no problem down there. Now this bridge is immediately east of Guatemala City. It's called Puente de las Vacas, Bridge of the Cows. It's about 160 or so feet high. I'm not sure I'd want to ride on top of a boxcar crossing that. Now here's a eastbound freight uh, crossing the bridge. These 600 class diesels are kind of unique. They have eight axles, three trucks, and they're 1,200 horsepower. And the reason for all the axles is that at the time they were built, about 1950, narrow gauge traction motors couldn't handle more than about 150 horsepower each. Now, here's the same train with a helper. Now, you'd probably wonder why they have a helper on a train that's going to be going downhill. Well, partway down the hill, the grade reverses and there's a short climb up to another summit. And what do you know? That's the summit, Converse Pass, about 2,800 foot elevation. Now, this is in Escuintla, city to the west of the capital. And this is one of the Uintah Mallets that came down there from Sumter Valley. This one, as far as I know, uh, never ran after I was down there in 1963. And now this is the other one, which it looks to be in better shape, number 250. Well, it turned out the next year they decided to stage a scene for a company calendar for 1965. So they brought the 250 up to Guatemala City and spruced it up, and it was going to be in the calendar picture. So here they are moving it around. Notice the smoke box is kind of rusty. They put some graphite on it before they took the pictures, and there they are doing that. This engine was also used in the calendar picture. It dates from the 1880s, and I heard that it wound up in the Smithsonian. I really don't know much about its history. Here's the setup for the calendar picture. And here's what the photographer wound up shooting. One of the eight axle diesels, the 440 and the Uintah Mallet. And that concludes the show. So, so any questions?
Wow, let's all just take a deep breath and let it out. I mean, Gordon, that was incredible. That was just a really neat program. It was so much fun. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. I've been doing this program now for 6 years, and it's days like this where it feels pretty good, because that was just a wonderful program, and I thought it was great. So, if anybody got any questions in the audience, let me flip this thing back over to our gallery view. Of course, George Foster. George, go ahead.
Okay, I noticed on the sugarcane train that at least one of the Gons was off the KCS. I don't know if they interchanged it or if they bought it and didn't re-letter it like they seem to have a habit of doing.
I'm afraid I don't know the story there. Where that was taken was to the east of Mexico City, not too far from Veracruz. And
Okay.
I believe it was on the FCM line. I have no idea how it got there.
Another one was I noticed that they had on some of those double headers, they had tank cars between them. Was that for weight distribution on trestles and bridges, or was that for extra water to because they didn't have too many water
You're
tanks?
talking about the train up to uh, uh, let's see, what town was that? Uh, and okay, that was on the NDM.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it was just. I guess I really don't know the answer. I'm unaware on that line of any bridges. It might have
One,
been just the track is light.
yeah, one thing I liked was that the photos of the FCEM electrics, because before that, the only ones I had seen were photos in one of the railroad magazine issues, and it showed it over near somewhere in Veracruz or that area, and it was looked like jungle and everything. So it was interesting to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
does anybody else have any questions? You can just raise your hand, or you can there's an emoji for raising your hand if you would like. Um, yeah, it's just, Gordon, I mean, the only real question I have is when can we get you back on the program here for another episode? Can we do something this coming spring, maybe?
well, there are more pictures.
I know. Elron, go ahead.
Gordon, I was just curious, do you speak Spanish? How did you handle the language barrier?
Well, I spoke enough.
Hmm.
I had 2 years in the high school, and I was able
Wow.
to. Well, when I would ask for a cab ride or anything like that, I would ask in Spanish. But so I also learned some of the the unique railroad terms. One of the funniest ones I had encountered was I spoke to a railroad and he mentioned the word maniobras, which was, huh? And I went back, to my hotel that night, looked at the dictionary. It's the word for maneuvers. What it
Oh.
was the word for switching.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
But a lot of the other words are a little more familiar. Casilla, for example, meant the cab, and
Hmm.
Caldela meant the boiler, and so on. But
Oh.
I did have one funny experience. I was in Mexico City at their yard. There was a 484 there, in perfect light. and the rods were up. I thought, you're supposed to have the rods down to take an absolutely perfect picture.
Right.
Well, I asked this officer, would you move the engine to get the rods down? What do you think he said? Do it yourself.
Oh my God. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I did.
Did you? Oh
Right
my.
on.
So anyway, and with regard to cab rides, I can't recall ever being turned down.
Wow.
So it was just really a great experience.
So who were some of the people
Fabulous.
that you went with on these trips?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Who are some of the people that went with you on these trips?
Oh, well, on the driving trip, I went with Bruce Ward, who's now deceased, in his VW Beetle as far as Mexico City and then back. Uh, on all these other trips, I traveled alone. Uh, but I met rail fans at various places
Oh,
in
there were other
Mexico.
fans out there. How often?
Not too often. I met Jack Swanberg in Mexico City in 1962, and Doug Cummings from Canada. I forget, I think maybe in 63. I met John Hungerford in Merida in 63. And so I met him in various places. But
Hello.
Hang on,
huh?
sorry about that. Somebody
um,
needs to mute in the audience, please.
One thing that was quite, I'm trying to think of this one other name. Uh, anyway, I did speak to one other rail fan before I went out. I can't remember his name. But anyway, I really had no trouble traveling alone down there.
Thank you, Gordon. Steve House, weren't those some of those locomotives from, didn't Gordon mention those were from the Sumter Valley? And aren't you part of the Sumter Valley?
Yeah, I was just going to raise my hand and mention that seeing the 250 and 251 kind of brought tears to my eyes. I wish they were still in existence. But when they scrapped the 251 and or 250, 251 in Guatemala, they did not uh, scrap the tenders with those. And those were the original tenders off the number 19 and 20. We got those back when we were going through the restoration of the 19. So one of them essentially was restored, but it pretty much had to be rebuilt from the frame up. We still have the other tender there, so they're both still in existence, and one still runs
Hmm.
at Sumter Valley.
So the question was in the audience, when did the 250 and 251 come to their demise? When were they scrapped, in other
I'm
words?
sorry, what was the
When
question?
were they, when was the 250 and 251 scrapped? What year?
I'm afraid I don't know. I really lost track of them after I went home from that trip.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact date either.
But
Okay, thank you. That was a
but it
question
was
from the audience.
I have a feeling that they got the 250 all spruced up there and fired up, and it probably never ran again.
Oh,
Just
wow. So that was the last run. Good for you. I mean, how many of these rare, incredible photographs could there be? I mean, this is just, Elrond, I mean, after last night, now today, I mean, my gosh, it's just wonderful. So, I'm going to see if anybody else has got any questions from the audience.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
This is Cesar Vergara, um,
Oh,
and I joined kind of late.
oh, Cesare, it is so good to see you. You were our guest about a year ago talking about the
Indeed, I
cowboys,
was.
right?
Yes, I was, and I enjoyed it very much. I recently listened to the presentation, but I'll get right to the point. I'm from Mexico myself.
I know that. Yes, from
Yeah,
Mexico City.
and so it's fascinating to. I didn't catch the presentation right in the beginning.
Yes.
I only got it in the end, but I can tell you that. I only remember as a very little boy for I forget the name of the gentleman that presented. Forgive me, I'm kind of like at a loss here. he mentioned all of the different places. If what is the name of the presenter?
Gordon Glattenberg. Today, that was Gordon Glattenberg.
Gordon, I don't know if you remember, anybody that had been there in the 60s, the train used to go in front of the Mexican White House, which was called Los Pinos. It's no longer that because we have the last president decided to make it a national park. I don't know what the heck they did with it, but it's an enormous, beautiful place. And the train used to run very close in front of it. And I remember in the 60s, 1962, let's say, the steam train passing through there,
Oh,
and just being amazed by it. And then years later, I worked at the National Railways of Mexico when it still existed, which was at the very end of its life. And I helped design the museum. Well designed, that is, it's in an original station from Benito Juarez, the president of Mexico in the 1860s, inaugurated that station where the museum is today in Puebla. And in that museum, they have an incredible amount of equipment, which people like yourselves would know what it is. I didn't myself know what most of the stuff was, And it was just fascinating to see your presentation and to see pictures of all of the different things. I feel kind of bad as a Latin American. I've only been in Mexico, and I was once in Colombia, in Medellin, but that's it. I have never been in Guatemala, which I would really like to go.
um, I would comment that I found Guatemala really is spectacular, both the scenery and the people.
Yeah,
No,
just go
yeah,
ahead, Cesar.
no,
Cesar.
I understand from a documentary. Uh, they have the most volcanoes of any country in the world.
Hmm.
Guatemala.
Hmm.
Yes.
Not, yeah, not Japan, not Hawaii. No, Guatemala has more volcanoes than any other country. I don't know how they quantify it, if it is per square mile or how many, if you count them by head count. I don't know what they
I
do,
don't
but
know. Yeah, because we've
yeah.
got a few in Alaska too. But for those of you that aren't familiar with Cesar Vergara, Cesar was the industrial designer that designed the Talgo passenger trains that the Amtrak Cascades currently uses. And he was a guest on our program about a year ago talking about his career as an industrial designer. So it's good to see you, and we hope that you're well, sir.
Well, you can laugh a little. I'm in the hospital right now, but yeah,
I see that. Yes, that's what.
yeah. I actually thought twice. Shall I put the camera on? I said, what the heck? Maybe they won't see it.
Well, we wish you the best, and it
Oh,
was so
I'm
good to
fine.
see you.
I come here. I come here once a month.
Mm.
I have a kind of a dubious honor. I'm a 9/11 survivor.
Oh my, oh my! I wish I had my hat with me. Wow.
Well, you know, got cancer from it, and I don't have cancer anymore. But I get these treatments every month, so that's what it. That's why I'm here.
Thank you. I mean, that is. I mean that. I mean, thank. I really appreciate you sharing that. And for those of us that are, are cancer survivors, it's
Yeah, no,
important.
it's not
You know,
exactly a nice club to belong to, but
hey,
Mm.
but it
some
beats
of
the
us are in
alternative.
that club.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And you know what? I'm really glad that you turned your camera on and that
Mhm.
and that you spent this time with us. This is
No, no, I really loved. Oh my God, all the
reminded you
pictures
of
and
your
that.
childhood. It must have, right?
Well, it was part of my. Yeah, I'll tell you a little funny story. I don't want to hog all these interesting, wonderful members you have here, and here I am giving the half an hour dumb comment. But I can tell you a little tiny story, and I won't say anything more. When I was probably, I would say, I want to say 10 years old. I was in Guanajuato, which was a popular place to go. I had friends that had a beautiful, they had an old house there actually in downtown Silao, which was a city nearby. And then someone suggested, why don't you go to Guanajuato for the day? Silao is in the state of Guanajuato. And so I don't remember how we got there. And I looked at the train and I remember going in the train and it smelled like holy hell. It was horrible. So I went to the engine, and if this does not preclude my life career, I don't know what does. I was like 10. I was a little guy, and I never had much cash. I think I had a 20 peso bill with me, which was very unusual to have. And I said to the engineer, "Hey, listen, I don't want to go in the car. It smells bad. Me and my friends want to go in the cab with you." And he said, "Yeah, what's in it for me?" I said, 20 pesos. We went on the cab. For the first time I ever went on a train in my life, I was in the cab.
Wow.
That's so, what a great story.
That's
Wow.
a great
It,
story.
it was
That's
a
just
it
wonderful.
was a steam engine, and the guy he says, "Don't tell anyone this because in the middle of the ride, I don't know how long it was, he stopped it and he says, I have to give something to my girlfriend." So he stopped the locomotive and ran down into some house somewhere there and came back. Yeah, no, it was really something. And then and in the evening we were back and it was the same train, the same guy. And he said, "Oh, you guys are back?" I said, "Yeah, but the $20 was a round trip. We're going with you." We went with him on the way back.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Awesome.
That's just
Anyway,
absolutely.
there's my inauguration into the rail world.
That's a
Wow.
great
And then you went
story.
on to be a famous industrial designer. Didn't you also design the Amtrak P-42 locomotive?
I designed I designed more locomotives of the new diesel electrics
Hmm.
passenger ones than anyone alive. I've designed 6 so far.
That's right.
Wow.
So yeah,
And yeah.
I did, and it kind of became if you want to have a good time in your work, my recommendation is, why don't you find something you like?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I like doing this, and that's how it was. I've been designing trains for 45 years in Europe and in Mexico and in the United States.
That's just outstanding. I mean,
Yeah.
wow. I mean, I'm so glad that you're here and that you've enjoyed Gordon's magnificent program. And folks, just
No,
a
it was really special. Thank you very
Mhm.
much for showing all those pictures. I wish my father, rest in peace, he died at 102, not
oh,
terribly long ago. He would have known everything looking at it. He was not a railroader, but a
but he
very,
was also, wasn't he an architect or didn't he
he
just,
was an architect, yes.
what famous building did he design?
Well, he was a very unusual architect. He designed schools his whole life, and
Oh,
he designed schools that were built all over the world because they were schools for rural teachers. And most of the schools, they used to have a little room where the teacher lived because there was nowhere else for the teacher to live.
like
So they actually
Alaska.
had yeah. So that was his world, his life experience mostly, and he worked for the World Bank for many years.
That's what it was. I remember now. Okay, the
Yeah,
World
and
Bank.
so
Yeah.
that's yeah, he designed schools
Huh.
and so but I ended up doing these train things, but makes me laugh that I didn't want to go in the passenger cars because they smelled bad.
So you rode in the cab.
Yeah.
What a great story. What a great
Yeah.
story. We're just kind of wrapping up our program right now. So just as a quick reminder, Cesar did a program for our PNRA Cascade Rail Foundation program back wasn't it last December, I think? Something like that. And that program is available on our YouTube channel, just like today's program will be available on our YouTube channel as well. And usually I try to get that done right after the program. You know, Elrond last time, it was the internet was like doing this to me. And as soon as our program was over, the internet started doing this, and it just took me a while to get it done. I was just a little
Oh,
frustrated. But
you
today
were
Oh, okay.
fast.
it's all smooth. So, you know, knock on wood. So we'll be back,
Yeah.
folks. Fair warning, we'll be back on October 29th. And just as a quick note, in case you don't have a link for the program or you can't find your link, go back to the previous program because the link in every message is always the same. So if you clicked on Elron, for example, if you clicked on your program link, it would have taken you to today's program. So just, but I fixed it in got your email fixed or your contact information fixed in their system. So you should be on my invite list now from now on. And we've got, like I say, some great stuff coming up. In closing, Margaret Weatherby, head of WSHS Archives. It's a very big name in our industry. November 12th, Bob St. John. Bob was here earlier today. Blue Mountains. We'll have George, of course, George Foster with us, of course, helping with the color commentary on that. November 26th, George Hardy, switching in Seattle. And George has got a number of good programs, and I'm already twisting his arm for next year. December 10th, Robert Scott, Jim Abney, and we'll have some sort of special program on December 31st. Anybody got anything more before we wrap up today's program?
Got a great story for you.
All right, I'm all ears.
A few weeks ago, some subhuman scum broke into one of the main building there at Lake Whatcom Railway there at Wickersham, and they proceeded to help themselves to parts off the locomotive. They tore the railing on the observation car apart. They stole clothes, electrical cords. They had bottle jacks to steal the brasses out of, so they were metal thieves. Well, a couple days later, somebody actually discovers all this, but everything's sitting there. The tools that they brought, the lifting straps, bolt cutters, jacks, all the stuff is piled right next to the door. The only thing missing was the bell, which is like hundreds of pounds of brass, and that's what their big prize if you're a scrapper. Well, one of the guys had his dog with him, and the dog was outside the gate a little ways and making a big fuss. And he looks over, and there's this big bag sitting off in the weeds that shouldn't be there. And they open it up, and there's the bell. And so, as far as we can tell, they went to all this work and got nothing. So I figured, well, what stopped them? It had to be something pretty important. Best guess is they were struggling with the two guys with this big heavy bill up a railroad track in the dark, and they either dropped it on their foot or tripped and fell and crushed them, and they just dumped it and took off because something forced them to leave in a big hurry, and that's the only thing we can think of. So I said, well, hey, check with the local emergency rooms and see if they can track them down. So the police are looking into that. But so
Maybe
far,
they got hernias.
well, as far as I can tell, they got nothing, and they left all these tools and stuff behind. So something really, substantial had to force them to do that. And anyway, I was like, get what you deserve, you scum. And,
Here's the rule. God doesn't like ugly.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I'd like to find out who they are. They've got some more stuff. They've added some more security cameras and whatnot like this now. But they had to cut the lock open. They kicked in the door of the building.
So what else can you tell us about what's going on at the Lake Watcom besides that? What's going on there these days?
Nothing. And nothing's going to happen until Frank dies. And then I suspect the whole thing will be destroyed. People have been asking me about that for years, and there's really no good solution unless you know somebody was young, healthy, had tons of money, and wanted to restore the whole thing. They can't fill the train crew anymore. The diesel doesn't even work. And they've got one guy who's doing some track work out there, but they've got track problems they can't do anything about because there's nobody left. Everybody's too
Hey,
old or dead or moved away and so on. So yeah, it's all just sitting there. It's really sad. I mean, all that work down the drain. Then they have these idiots come in and steal things like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
hey,
this. Yeah, I've had a similar experience at work, so I know what you mean. So
hey, Daniel, is that the 924 up there? Is that up at Lake
1070,
Buck?
924, it's at the scrapyard. I mean, Snoqualmie. And yeah,
Oh,
the 1070, it's an L9 as opposed to an L5.
yeah.
And
Thank
they,
you.
they left the builder's plates on it. Now, if they're rail fans, that's the first thing they take. Alco Manchesters are rare. So we figured they were metal thieves, and that's why they bought the bottle jacks to get the brasses out. And since friction bearings have been illegal for so long, I kind of wonder how come they knew to do that. So they must have been real professional scrappers. And so we'll see. Hopefully they'll find them, but hopefully they're
Yeah,
crippled for
there,
life
there,
and serve it.
there, it's an alternative mindset, that's for sure. I mean, why they go through all this, we had a similar incident at work. I don't mean to digress. We had a similar incident at work where somebody stole a maintenance van from the University of Washington and drove it through the front door of the building, and they didn't take anything.
Oh yeah. Well,
I
yeah.
mean,
So why
just
would they
why
walk off
would
and
you
leave
go
the
through all this
tool?
trouble and not even take anything?
Well,
So
that's what it says. So something forced the issue, and it had to be trying to take the bill out of there, and something happened. Presumably, one of them got hurt and hopefully crippled for life. But
yeah, well, there you go. Well, on that sort of downbeat note, we're going to need to bring today's exciting presentation to a close. This will be online on YouTube on my channel, JF Junction, later this afternoon. Jack Christensen, it's always good to see you. Jack, you want to unmute for 1 minute and say hi? You're unmuted. You unmute yourself.
Yeah.
It's good
Can
to
you
see
hear
you,
me
Jack.
now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay.
So, hey,
Yes,
Jack,
there.
would you have time on a Tuesday for us to have a Zoom meeting with you?
That's Tuesday.
On,
Well,
on a Tuesday in like the next week or two, would you have some time to meet with
yeah, we're
George Foster
always
and
here.
I?
Yeah, we're always here.
Okay. Well,
I,
we're not gonna do it today because we're running out of time, but I'll be back in touch with you via email, and we're gonna get together, and I got some pictures I want to talk to you about. So,
okay.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard from a guy over Eldsburg, retired engineer, and he was asking me about a wreck of second two back during the 1940s. And he lives near Eldsburg, and he's got a semaphore in his yard. If you can see it in the distance at night, he lights it up. He was thought that the wreck was second two, that the engine was still laying there, and I told him no, uh, the engineer was killed, and the fireman lost his leg. It's a story in my book, The Wreck of Second Two, and that's
Yeah, we should come back. We did a story from your book last time about how
yeah,
you were the diesel engineer behind the 44
yeah.
49.
He
And
thought the engine was still laying out there. I said, no, they uh, sent it to South Tacoma. Uh, the wreck, the locomotive ended up on its side, facing opposite direction. Uh, the cab was wiped off. The NP steam engine cabs are kind of flimsy. They were wood with 1/8 inch steel plate on the outside. But I remember the engine going through Auburn Yard in a flat car on its way to South Tacoma. They wiped the cab off, and I think they lost one of the domes, but they rebuilt the thing in a very short time, had it back in service. So I told him not to look for it out there. It never did. They didn't leave it there.
well, there you go. Thanks for checking in, Jack. We're going to end today's program, and I'll be back in touch with you so that we can get together and spend some quality time together. Like I say, I've got a few employee photos I want to look at with you. So
Okay.
I'll be back in touch. I'll send you an email later today.
Okay. Well, we're always here, and uh, one thing I do have is a fair amount of time.
There you go. And we're going to take advantage of it. Um, I got to go around the room here and just say thank you to a few people. First, Gordon. I mean, I just kept gasping picture after picture. It was just like so good. And then Caesar joining us and talking about, growing up in Mexico. And that was just like frosting on the cake. I mean, it was just like the maraschino cherry. It's great. Steve Hoff, how was talking about, the Sumter's relationship to those locomotives, and of course, spending time with Daniel on a Lake Whatcom update, and then finally with Jack Christensen. So on that happy note, at 2:21 p.m. West Coast time, I'm going to thank and of course, most important, the audience. Now, normally I do it for the audience, but today I was doing it for me because that was just a great program, Gordon, and I can't wait to get you back again. So until next time, everybody, which will be in 2 weeks with Margaret Weatherby, should be another outstanding program. I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm your host and moderator, Jonathan Fisher, saying I just ended the recording now.